Hi everyone. So my name is Lucille and I'm a second year MDiv student. I work in the alumni office with Karine Le and Pierre Canet. Thanks for tuning in to all of you. So you can use the Q&A option to ask your questions during the event, not the chat. So you can do it during the panel or at the end. And at the end, you can ask directly to one panelist or ask a general question. And also you can ask your questions in English or in French, as you prefer. So to give you a bit of context about Inspire Students, these are monthly thematic roundtables organized by the Alumni Office, aimed at connecting current students and alumni of the Institute around shared interest and to shared experience. The series is collaboration with Career Services, which you know very well, namely Aline and Tiffany. Aline will be moderating the event today, and we're also doing this in partnership with the Professional Development Committee of the Institute. So today our session is on agriculture and food system, and we have 4 panelists with us today. First one being Sofia Condes. So Sofia Condes is an investor outreach manager at the FAIR Initiative, a global network of investors focusing on ESG risks in the global food sector. Prior to this, she led the innovative finance program of the Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition, GAIN, and she's also worked as a strategy specialist at the World Economic Forum and an analyst at JP Morgan. Sofia holds a BA in International Relations and Economics from the University of Geneva and an MA in International Development, MDev, from the Institute, but also a Master in Science in Public Health and Health Economics from the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. She's worked on several projects and initiatives in Europe, Latin America, and Africa. Our second panelist today is Michael Karner. So Michael is a project coordinator on ecosystems, climate change, and biodiversity for Plan Bleu, which is a program with UNEP Mediterranean Action Plan in Marseille, France. And after graduating from an MDev in 2011, Michael worked as an environmental consultant for various international organizations and NGOs on topics such as landscape restoration, permaculture, regenerative land use, and sustainable water management, with a focus on the Mediterranean region. Our third panelist is Seda Kodjoyan. She's an evaluation manager at the Food and Agriculture Organization of the UN, where she's been managing a portfolio of evaluation projects worldwide with a focus on projects funded by the Global Environment Facility. Seda is an alumni of the Graduate Institute with an MIA. She graduated from MIA in 2014. And following graduation, she's worked at several research centers, NGOs, and international organizations on topics surrounding climate change, environmental issues, and public health. Over the past 8 years, she's become specialized in monitoring and evaluation with a focus on independent evaluation. And finally, we have Abby Unita, who's a PhD candidate at the Copernicus Institute of Sustainable Development at Utrecht University. She works within the ERC-funded Global Goals project, where she explores how the Sustainable Development Goals are used and translated at the country level, why, and with what implication. And after graduating from an MDev degree at the Institute in 2017, she worked in research and stakeholder engagement with UN Environment on a statewide regenerative agricultural program in Andhra Pradesh, India. So a warm welcome to all our panelists, and I'll leave the floor to Aline for moderating the event.
Thank you, Lucille, and welcome to everyone. So the first question I would have for you all, it will be the same question, is as a career advisor, I'm always curious about how did you land this job? So I don't know if Sophia, you would like to start?
Yes, thank you very much, Aline, and also thank you to Lucille and Karine and the rest of the team for inviting me to be here with you today. It is really a pleasure. So I think maybe kind of diving into the first question, I think I would say that landing the job that I have now, I can't really answer that question on a vacuum because the job you have that is not your first job is always kind of a continuation of the other jobs that you have had prior to it. And especially the job that I have now has required kind of a mix of skills and experiences that I have acquired for my previous jobs in the private sector and in international organizations. However, when it comes to the practicalities of actually getting to the job, it really came down for me to being kind of an active networker and understanding how what I was doing and I think it's something I encourage all students to do, is kind of knowing which topics you're interested in, and then following the organizations, the companies, etc., that are relevant players in such topics. So I think in today's world, LinkedIn is a very important tool. And I think for this job specifically, I follow all the organizations and the companies that I find relevant because I want to know about the work that they're doing, the events that they're hosting, and also it gives you visibility of kind of what the market is in terms of job opportunities. And I was already quite kind of plugged into food systems and following different organizations that were working in food systems, including FAIR, which is the organization I work for now. And then I was able to see kind of, it is a relatively small organization, but I was able to quickly see when they were hiring for new people. And when they advertised for this job, I probably saw it the second day that it was advertised through LinkedIn. And when I saw it, I thought, wow, this is kind of, I'm in a very niche space because I had been working at the intersection of finance and food. And this was a job that kind of required somebody in the intersection of that space. So I actually did not apply for the job. I just went and looked at the kind of on LinkedIn, you can see the people that work in a specific company. And I looked at the person that I thought was probably the hiring manager, and I contacted her directly through LinkedIn. And then that started a conversation, and then I kind of like went through the normal process of like the different rounds of interviews, case studies, etc. But really it was through that connection and kind of already knowing what they were doing and already knowing that they had an open opportunity. So again, I really highly encourage for everybody to use their LinkedIn strategically. So I think that would be my answer to the first question. Thank you.
Thank you. But did you apply after all, or after talking to that person, or they just led you to the interview stage?
Yeah, so normally, so when you get to like the hiring manager, like usually it's all like you already applied. Like after that we had a quick exchange on LinkedIn. She said, let's have a call. And in that call, when she sent me the invitation, I just replied to the email sending my CV, and it was like, I am applying for this job. But then I had to go through the same steps of any candidate that would have applied and would have been shortlisted for the first call with the hiring manager. The difference was that I already had that call, so I just spoke to other people. But again, I think that now this is common practice. I know that when I have been hiring for jobs, a lot of people have contacted me on LinkedIn. And when I see a well-written message and that highlights relevant experience, I usually will give that candidate kind of a chance, considering that sometimes you receive hundreds of emails. It already puts you in a more visible position than when you're kind of just one of 100 emails. Sorry, 100 CVs. So yeah, highly encourage students to be proactive when they're looking for jobs.
Thank you so much, Sophia. This is really useful. Michael, how did you land this job?
Thanks, Aline. So actually, I used to work for the Neighbors, the Center for Mediterranean Integration, a small office of the World Bank, and they really liked my coffee making skills. But seriously speaking, I fully agree with what Sophia said. When you're not landing your first job, all of your experiences that have come before, both professional and personal, if you've done some volunteering or even your interests, can lead you to land a job. I'm saying that because somehow I landed this job through, of course, my professional experiences. I had decided that I wanted to focus on the Mediterranean region and on agriculture and food systems. And generally speaking, I think that choosing a focal area or a focal region is very important. Because then you start developing your networks and you realize that the people working on specific topics in a specific region are actually not so numerous. And that really helps to sort of get a foothold into the whole scene, whatever it may be. And my personal interests and experiences in as Lucille mentioned, landscape restoration and permaculture took me to some pretty far-flung and remote places around the Mediterranean, and I never would have thought they would help me to acquire a real job, because I was working at a very grassroots level, with farmers and local stakeholders, things that basically have no visibility. But because I did that, that lent some credibility to my application in terms of languages, in terms of, field knowledge, etc. So, sometimes we say that some shortcuts make long delays, and I'd say that some detours make shortcuts as well. When you take the time to explore your interests, your professional motivations, in alternative ways, that can lead to a very interesting CV that tends to stand out. I would say. I'm not saying that's my case, but I really have tried throughout these 10 years since I graduated, sorry, 12 years, wow, to always inform my professional choices with my personal interests and also beliefs and aspirations. Thanks.
Okay, thank you so much. And so does that mean that you heard about the job during coffee?
No, I actually heard about it because my neighbor at the time and friend who informs me about it and said, hey, you should apply to this because it fits your profile. And I think he told me that because he knew that I had project management skills, more like classical core skills that you're probably going to need in international development. But I also went around the Mediterranean training people in permaculture and stuff like soil creation and really local stuff. But he knew I had the maybe people skills and training skills that were required for this job, because now I'm going all around the Mediterranean training people on coastal climate change adaptation solutions.
Okay, thank you so much, Mike. Seda, same question. How did you hear about that job?
Sure. Hello, everyone. So when I joined the food and agriculture space, I was already specialized in evaluation. And I knew for a while that where my heart was really to be in a more environmentally oriented organization that has a mission which was more in line with environmental protection. And I wasn't there. I was specialized in evaluation, but I was working in public health. So what I did, I actually did 2 more pro bono research assignments with 2 different organizations. Then I started attending conferences. One was the Global Landscapes Forum, which I would recommend to students attending here. I think it's actually free if you're a student, and you can also log in online and listen to it online. You don't need to travel necessarily. And there, a lot of UN organizations are present, NGOs, etc. Then finally, I attended a professional conference, which was specifically for international evaluation specialists in international organizations. And that's where I met my future colleagues. Eventually, they had an opening to replenish their roster of evaluators and evaluation managers, and I applied to that roster. And soon enough, a few months later, there was a proper opening for a couple of candidates to join their office. And I was selected and then moved here to Rome from Geneva.
Thank you so much, Seda. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Well, Abby, for you, you're a candidate in PhD.
Yes.
So maybe we can talk about that too. How did you find out about this opportunity?
Well, an old colleague actually emailed me. So, I mean, there are a lot of things that have been said that really resonate with my experience as well. And, how I landed this job is really not linear, and I didn't really expect to do this particular kind of PhD. It's a program that's part of part of a bigger research project funded by the European Research Council. There are 10 researchers working here. So it's this PhD program is quite different in the sense that it involves also project management. You have deliverables, work packages, and you have to basically report to the European Research Council on your research. But how I landed this was a confluence of factors that just happened all at the same time. I knew I wanted to do a PhD, but I wasn't sure exactly what kind of programs that I would enjoy and would like to do. I'd always been interested in topics of food and agriculture. My work in India was about scaling up agroecology with UN Environment. So during that time in Andhra Pradesh, there were so many questions that popped up, and I really wanted to, I was really eager to start my PhD. So I started looking during my time there, and around the same time, an old colleague said, look, there's this project, it's quite broad in scope, but I think it'd be a good fit for you. It was actually the first PhD I applied for. And so, yeah, I applied, I contacted the PI just to say, look, this is quite broad. This is my background and interest. Would there be a space for me to kind of conduct this kind of research within your project? And we had a little exchange, and after a couple of rounds of selection process, I got the job. So that's what I'm doing now.
Amazing. First application, excellent. Thank you so much. Okay, so my next question will be for Sophia. So we have a lot of students interested in impact ESG investments, and they wish to build a career in that path. Why are ESG impact investments relevant for food and agriculture?
Yes, thank you for the question. So I think that the sector of food and agriculture, I mean, just maybe starting with a little bit of background of what it means, what a sector means for impact investors and for ESG investors. So the sector of food and agriculture is one of the few sectors, I would say, that kind of in a globalized world had stayed relatively static and undisrupted since the Green Revolution and the industrialization of food. So it means that in the last 5 years, there's been a lot of innovation, and specifically for impact investors, and I guess also aided by the fact that impact investing has kind of risen as an industry, they were perfectly placed to support some of these opportunities, some of the disruption that is happening, and kind of some of the innovations that are happening in food and agriculture in both high income and low income contexts. So what we are seeing is that in high income contexts, we see a lot of the impact investors focused on topics such as food technologies that will increase the sustainability of food, such as vertical farming or alternative proteins. And then in low income countries, we see a lot of attention focused on supporting projects that are helping smallholder farmers produce food in a more efficient way, or making nutritious food more accessible for people in low and middle income markets. So I think that it is becoming more and more relevant for the impact investment industry, the whole sector. And I think for those of you that are interested in impact investments, I really encourage you to go and look at the surveys that the Global Impact Investing Network releases every year, because food and agriculture is increasing as the share of kind of the sector that is gaining more attention for investors, and that is attracting more capital and more deals. And then for ESG investors that are more looking at the environmental, social, and governance factors of larger, more established companies, the food industry has kind of had escaped a little bit of the scrutiny that other industries had, such as the energy sector, around the implications that the industry has on environmental issues. But that is definitely over. I think in the last 3 years, a lot of the ESG focused investors have realized that food and agriculture, but especially kind of global food, like the global food companies, are exposed to a wide set of ESG risks. And they want to have enough data and kind of enough visibility to be able to navigate and distinguish which are the companies that are doing better and which are doing worse. And it is a very complex sector, but it is a sector that will always be relevant because we need food for survival. So it's not a sector, unlike other industries that might kind of be what we call, kind of more transitional, or that can come and go. Let's give an example of something like, for example, fashion, that when there's a recession, it becomes less relevant, etc. Food will always be there. So now investors are more and more interested in learning, how do we navigate the food sector, and how do we distinguish best practice from poor practice? So let me stop there because it's a big question, but happy to come back to it if there's follow-up questions.
Thank you, Sophia. That was really informative. Thank you very much. Okay. So my next question would be for Michael. I've seen that you have had amazing experiences so far, all in your relevant, all relevant in your field of interest. What did surprise me is that based on your LinkedIn profile, so you'll have to correct me if I'm wrong, it seems like you didn't work or didn't have any internship during your time at the Institute. Is this correct?
Yes, that is correct. No internships, nothing related to
Okay.
the MDev or the Graduate Institute. I did have
so-
some small jobs
sorry.
teaching languages and helping pupils at schools out with their homework to pay for my expenses, basically, but nothing focused on the actual MDev. Would you like
Okay.
me to carry on, Eileen, with the question?
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to ask you, how did you leverage your time at the Institute?
So I really enjoyed MDev from 2009 to 2011 intellectually. There was a lot going on, and I spent a lot of time at the library studying. I think that back then I had decided that I really wanted to use this time to learn and study all of these topics that were quite new for me. I came from a history and politics background, and suddenly I was studying global ecology and things that involved the natural sciences as well. So I felt I had some catching up to do. And then I did actually engage in some field work for the master's thesis back then in Portugal. I went to an eco village to study this what they call this water retention landscape, where rain and any kind of precipitation is used for agriculture and restoring the landscapes there that are currently being desertified, as you know. I also spent a fair amount of time on Mont Salève and in the mountains wandering around. I'm a bit of a nature freak, so that's always been important for me. But I'll finish by saying that I wasn't sure at the time that I felt like staying in Geneva and integrating the entire community there. I was a bit shy. I wasn't too sure of my skills or my actual value in that place. I was quite impressed by all these very talented and dedicated people around me who seemed to have such a good idea of where they were heading. I didn't, and I think that for me, that MDev really helped me to better understand that I wanted to work at the interface of, I'd say, social sciences and natural sciences, which happens to be, well, food and agriculture systems, amongst others. So it was a time for reflection and adjusting the next steps, I would say. Thanks.
Thank you. I think your testimony is very important because right now I have a lot of students coming to my counseling sessions, and they are very starting to panic because they want to start the next step, the career step. And so they feel pressure to find an internship, as soon as possible. And because they kind of assume that if they don't start now, well, maybe they will not land a job after they graduate. So I think it's very interesting to hear your testimony, because that will definitely release the pressure from them, that it's totally possible to leverage your time in Geneva by studying more and also by reflecting about the whole thing. So thank you. That was really useful for a lot of students, I'm sure. Thank you. Now I have a question for Sida. Through your profile, we see that you have had you have worked in many different roles before you find your niche in evaluation. How did you go about this process, and what advice would you give students who are also trying to figure out roles they are interested in?
Yeah, I agree with you that it's very good to what you are interested in and what you're good at. So in fact, it's a good thing to try different avenues, different jobs. And when you're a student and just starting out, that's the perfect time to do it. And no one will, question, I think, that you did this during the first years. Eventually I came to M&E because I am naturally inquisitive, and I was wondering always, are we doing the right thing? Can we do better? And why we're doing what we're doing. So that led me to M&E, and I had an internship while at the Institute, still at Care International, on the M&E team. And I remember one instance where they had, we realized that they were asking, they had some follow-up action, but they never checked on these follow-up actions if the implementers are actually doing that. So then I brought it up to my manager and said, why aren't we checking if these things have been done? And that was, I think, a pivotal point, because he agreed, and we changed kind of the program, the way M&E was done there. And I became passionate about this, about accountability and learning through monitoring and evaluation. So I would advise students to ask this question, why? Why are we doing what we're doing, especially if you find yourselves in big organizations, in the UN in Geneva. And now that I am with the UN here, I see how heavy it can be and how bureaucratic it can be. So see if that's for you, or if you try to find ways to do things more efficiently and effectively. And secondly, you must find what is meaningful for you in order to stay motivated, to stay passionate, and to do your best. So if you see that one area is not as meaningful as the other, and you don't see much reason to do things, you can move around. And once you find what is meaningful to you, you need to understand how your skill set fits. So what are you good at, and how can you contribute to this one arena?
Thank you again for this excellent piece of advice. Thank you.
Sure.
And now, Abby. So after graduating from the Institute, you worked, as you said, with UNEP in Andhra Pradesh. How did the experience of studying development in a classroom compare to the experience you gain on the field through this project? And would you advise students hoping to work in similar fields to get field experience? We cannot hear you.
Sorry.
No
Yeah, so I'll work backwards in answer to your last question. Yes, I would definitely recommend that students wishing to do further research do some experience in the field. For me, I had done some before I started my master's and after as well. And at the Graduate Institute, I found, like Michael, it was a really stimulating and productive intellectual space. You can question assumptions, unlearn ideas, and that's what really drew me to research. I really like that. And I think that's when the idea of doing a PhD really settled with me. And that's really juxtaposed, I think, with the field work that I did. So during my time at the Institute, particularly the subjects that I took, it was you were encouraged to cast a critical eye on your development. So you were critiquing it, and all of a sudden I was doing it. So it was a really, you also have to confront your assumptions while you do it. And it wasn't a good space for, it was a good learning space, but I knew that, development projects, especially big ones like this, the project I was working on was trying to basically raise funds through blended finance to scale up agroecology in Andhra Pradesh. But in that process, there were a lot of institution building, et cetera, that really responded to investors, concerns. And that process was very political and fraught. And it was really interesting to see and experience it firsthand. But it really made me want to like, explore like the kind of implications these processes have through the PhD. So it was different but complementary, and it really clarified for me like the space I find more for me, where I feel I could contribute better.
Thank you so much, Abby. That was really good to know. Thank you. Okay, now my next question is for Sophia again, the last one. Given your degrees, mostly in international relations, economics, and health, what attracted you to JP Morgan? And has this experience given you an edge for the job you have today at FAIR Initiative?
Yeah, thank you, Aline. So yes, I mean, this is a question that I've had at several points in my career. So I think I have to say that when I was at the Institute, and even before joining the Institute, I always thought that I would work for the UN or for international organizations. And I had a few internships in international organization, even in my time at the Institute. And while they were very I learned a lot, they were unpaid and they were unsupervised, mostly unsupervised. So these are really big structures. So it was sometimes a little bit difficult to kind of find like where I would fit in and exactly what I was supposed to do. So I think that I was eager to have an internship that was structured and paid when I was kind of looking at the next round of applying for internships. I think you're all aware of how expensive it is to survive in Geneva. So it all started with the offer of an internship at JP Morgan, working for the Latin American team. I am from Latin America, and I was doing my dissertation on the topic of impact investments and their role in developing markets in Latin America. So I thought it would be relevant. And then after the internship, I was offered a full-time job. So while I always knew that I wasn't going to be a banker forever, and I wanted to go back to something that had like more of a purpose and a kind of a collaboration focus, I can't stress enough the value that an experience in a top tier bank has given me for the rest of my career. It allowed me to understand, first of all, how financial markets work, then how the private sector is incentivized. And I can't stress enough for anybody that is thinking of public-private partnerships, do consider the private sector. It is much more easy to engage with the private sector if you have worked in the private sector. And it also gave me a commercial and a sales edge that I have carried in my next experiences. And that commercial and sales edge, maybe you might be thinking that sounds so boring just to be selling products. Well, I think you should contemplate the fact that it's very useful for fundraising. It is very useful for influencing a variety of stakeholders. So it's definitely a very transferable skill that now I've been able to use in many different ways, not related to selling products. So yeah, something to consider when you're looking at jobs, that is an edge that you will have if you go into anything that is kind of commercially driven.
Thank you. Very interesting, especially at the light of your degrees. Thank you. Michael, last question for you. What are some of the skill sets and motivations that you think will be useful for students hoping to work in the field of agriculture and food systems?
Thank you, Aline. So let's start with skill sets. I think we can look at two different types of skill sets. If you're seeking to work in food systems and agriculture at a more institutional level, let's say like what I'm doing now with this regional office of UNEP, then classical project management skills are really important. What counts is being able to not only coordinate expenses, coordinate partners, coordinate your team, coordinate deliverables. It's a lot of coordination, actually. So you need an attention to detail and also the ability to think ahead, plan ahead, and connect the dots, identify useful opportunities to collaborate with other people who are working on the same topics. Pretty classical stuff, I would say. I have little experience of the private sector, so I think Sophia said some really interesting words about that. I do think it's a very interesting field to be working in terms of agriculture and food systems. And if we're looking at a more, let's say, local level, if you're looking at doing some field work or research, then I think that's where the extra skills that can give you an edge come in. Because agriculture is basically food growing in ecosystems. It's context specific. It depends on the ecosystems, the climates, the people, the fauna and flora that live in that area. And so it's fascinating. But when you arrive there, I find it's useful to deconstruct to some extent what you've been studying at school and observe what's going on in the place you're working in. And that requires a bit of modesty, I think, and humility. It's quite useful to engage with the people who are actually growing the food and who have been growing the food for millennia now. The transition to agriculture is one of the defining moments of human civilization, and we should never forget that the way we work the land and the way we use the land has shaped the entire planet. So I think that these observation skills and trying to think not only maybe at a social science level, but also at a natural science level can help you to develop some holistic and systemic thinking. Because when you look at ecosystems, you can get a fairly good idea of how the many different elements of an ecosystem connect and interact. And that will help you to understand not only more about agriculture and food systems, but also about human societies, also about crucial natural resources like water, like soil, like fauna and flora and biodiversity, and better understand the global effects of climate change, amongst others, and how they manifest locally. So I would really encourage you to, keep honing those project management skills, those skills that we were already trained in during my time at the Institute. That was very useful, by the way. But yeah, go outside, talk to the people who are growing the food, talk to the people who are trying to preserve local biodiversity, talk to the people who are on the ground, because they usually speak a different language than us. We're sort of incubated in quite a specific context, and it's very important, I think, to be able to speak to everyone, to bring everyone on board, and to share your visions of what a sustainable agricultural future, and sustainable food systems could look like. And the answer does not lie in one spot, as you all know. It's only through discussion and basically exchanging views and learning from each other that we'll be able to develop these sectors sustainably. Thanks.
Definitely. Thank you so much. That was really insightful. Seda, the last question. I wanted to know, how did you develop, how do you feel you develop your leadership skills into becoming an evaluation manager?
So I've been quite fortunate because I received my education in the US, where you're encouraged to do a lot of critical thinking in a university setting. And I joined the student senate in college already, so that really helped to get an early start on public speaking, etc. And I must say also, naturally, I have this drive. I'm okay with being a leader, or I'm also super organized. So that also helps in project management, like Michael said, which is really important in my job now. And I would say, you have to be naturally inclined, because if you are not, you'll feel quite uncomfortable in that position, because the job is stressful. It is stressful to be a manager. Then I make use of regular opportunities that come up. Like my organization has been really good during the pandemic to organize trainings for us virtually, for example, on communication for managers. And finally, and I think this point will be quite relevant to the students, I'm in a unique situation because I have to hire teams often for short-term projects, external consultants. And very often I have to interview and hire consultants who have a decade or more of an experience than I do. So it's important to stay humble in my position as a manager, to allow to also kind of distinguish between what they're bringing to the table and what I'm bringing to the table, and being confident, in your credibility as a manager. And the reason why I say students will be able to relate is because most of us are not scientists, and we will not become scientists probably. So what I do is kind of distinguish between, okay, this is my team leader, they're an expert in climate change adaptation agricultural programs, and I respect that and I will trust them with that. And yet, what I bring to the table, and then knowing my organization, knowing the processes, being able to coordinate with them. So it's very important to stay respectful, I think, of their expertise as well, and create that synergy. And one of the most important things for me is, as a manager, I think the cornerstones are credibility and trust, and not to lose that as a leader.
Thank you so much, Seda. Abby, last question. I think you mostly answered it already, but as you know, we have many students wondering whether they should do a PhD. And so my original question was, what made you make the decision? So I don't know if there's anything left to say. What you would like to stress, at least, for those students who are
I wouldn't recommend a PhD if you're not interested in research. I think that's really that's really important. I love it, and I think for me, like, it's kind of, I feel like it makes me a better person, because it really, well, I guess I try to at least not cling on to a set of ideas, or always question assumptions, and also learn other people's perspectives. I find, especially, and now if you look at, I'm from Australia, the political conversation there is very left and right. And I think people develop positions, and then that for me results in a flattening of the complexity of the problems to be discussed. So I really love research, because I get to sit on a fence sometimes and explore different things. So if you and I think that's why I decided to pursue a PhD. I'm not saying that all academics is like that, or academia is a particularly conducive culture to do that, but I think you have space to carve out yourself as well.
And do you think that holding a PhD in your specific field will help you reach other type of jobs, or you could have reached them without a PhD?
Yeah, I don't know if the PhD is a career stepping stone for me. And in that sense, please forgive me. I think it's a bit of a self-indulgent project.
It's fine.
It's definitely not for me I'm not doing it with a view to get a particular kind of job. But throughout my PhD, I've also kept up with doing a bit of consultancy here and there, so that I keep in touch with former networks and colleagues. Yeah.
Thank you so much. No, this was really interesting to hear your testimony, because we really have students who don't know whether this should be their next career move or not, or if it's mandatory in their specific field or not, or to access certain jobs.
I know some people in doing PhDs at the Copernicus Institute don't have any plan to stay in academia, so they're doing it to get specific expertise or develop specific expertise, like foresight or anticipatory governance and all these kind of practical things. And they often work with practitioners and policymakers in this space anyway, so they're always connected. So I guess it depends. You can use a PhD a number of ways, but I think you still need to like research.
Thank you for emphasizing that. Lucille, I leave the floor to you. Thank you for everything.
Thank you to all the panelists. This was super insightful, especially because I'm interested in working in agriculture and food systems. So this was super useful for me. Now I'm going to make all the attendees panelists. So you're free to turn on your cameras and ask your questions. And if you don't feel like it, you can also type in your questions in the Q&A and I'll read them out loud. So yeah. Now everyone is a panelist, and I'm just gonna do like this. Yes, it's nice to see everyone. If you want to turn on your cameras, but you don't have to. And you can raise your hand, and if you want to say your question out loud, and I'll just give the floor to you. Yes, Natalia.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you to all of you for your insights on careers in agriculture and food systems. And I actually have a question for Sophia, which is not related to agriculture and food systems, but I'd like to know how did you compete with people with a mathematics or finance degree and background for the position you previously had at JP Morgan, and what skills and experience did you highlight for these jobs?
Yes, thank you, Natalia, for your question. So yeah, that is actually a very good question. And I have to say I was somewhat of an outlier in terms of the other analysts that worked there. Most of them had a finance background. I think when I was going through the internship application process, I kind of really highlighted the fact that my background allowed me to kind of understand the different interconnections that affected financial markets. And while I had kind of I had kind of enough quantitative skills to understand kind of, and at least to be able to learn more about financial products, that I had kind of the ability to kind of connect what that meant in a specific context. For example, what that meant for the geopolitics of Latin America and how the macroeconomy influenced financial markets, etc. So kind of like all of those interconnections, I was able to make them. And I also think languages help a lot. So definitely useful if you're looking for international work to leverage your languages in a region. But then, yes, again, it is a lot about also kind of like the soft skills. Most big companies value soft skills. So it is about like how you present yourself and how you present information in a concise way. So I guess that allowed me to get the internship. And then the internship, which was like, I think I remember it was like 10 weeks, is like a 10-week interview where you actually kind of need to show what you can do. So it was a lot of learning and a lot of like, I definitely felt that I had a kind of a steeper learning curve than those that had done graduate studies on finance, but that if I dedicated a little bit of time, I could kind of like, yeah, get up to speed. Thank you. I hope that helps clarify.
Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. You can unmute yourself if you want to ask a question.
Hello, I had a question. Thank you so much for taking the time out to address all of us today. We've all been very interested in learning more about food and agricultural systems. In fact, the Institute offers a course as well on this, which many of us are actually taking this semester. So it's been really interesting. And from the discussion that we've had thus far, I had two questions. And all of you have talked about the importance of developing various soft skills, which really help in securing internships or job positions in your career. But my question pertained more to subject matter knowledge and how you all went about it. Because from the way I see it, an interdisciplinary program allows you to acquire more generalist knowledge in various different fields, including food and agriculture. But during your time at the Institute, how did you go about developing a deeper knowledge and understanding of the specific subfield that you were interested in? And and how did you decide from this wide diversity of subfields within this field of food and agriculture, how did you decide upon this particular field that you are now working in? That's all. Thank you so much.
Could I take the first part on subject matter? I would love to answer this, Tanvi. Thank you. So I think at the Institute, what is offered, and we're sometimes really kind of shy away from it. There are more hard subjects taught, like statistics, for example. It was a requirement in my time. I don't know if it still is, but this can be hugely helpful. Economics, for instance. I actually did receive my first degree in economics, so I didn't have to repeat the statistics. But it comes up again, in my work now. And then look also outside, in your free time. For example, I'm recently I was looking for experts in geolocation, GIS, ArcGIS, etc. So this is something that is relevant for agriculture because you can do land cover analysis, etc. Then I did a JPAL impact evaluation course online. And one piece of advice when you're applying, somebody asked the question on in the question and answers, did you apply, did you network? And you can apply on the websites. I know there's this idea that the UN, it's true that we receive a lot of applications, but you'd be surprised how many people are not qualified. But you must have there the expertise, this kind of things like statistics or really specific things that the hiring manager is looking for. Make sure it's mentioned in your profile.
Thank you, Seda. Does Abby want? Yeah,
Sorry?
I was going to say, Abby, you want to add something maybe?
Well, for me, in terms of, I don't know even if you do a specialized degree, whether you always acquire more knowledge in the work that you do. So I think Michael mentioned humility. It's really important, even when you know a lot, to come into a project. Also, having the expectation that you might be wrong about something, and that you're there also to learn. And of course, you have expertise to contribute. And at the Graduate Institute, I guess the way that I went about it was, I did geography and environmental science for my bachelor. So I had the GIS skills, and I did some quant already. Most of the stuff that I did at the Graduate Institute was basically all the food and agriculture topics offered or subjects offered by the School of from ANSO and International Law. So I was really interested in sort of looking at food and agriculture from a more qualitative lens, because it does, it intersects with so many things, our history, like modern agriculture, is even said to have precipitated the Anthropocene, for example. Sedentary agriculture really reshaped the landscape. My grandfather was a rice farmer in East Java. For me, it was also, there was a personal connection, and I really like the ways in which agricultural systems have changed and shaped and reshaped. I could see that traced through my family history. And that's really important for me and really interesting. I guess that sort of skills or knowledge you don't acquire necessarily through institutional settings. But yeah, and for me, I did an internship with the UN office in Indonesia before I started my master's at the Graduate Institute. And it was on RED Plus. I don't know if you know it, but it's a UN project trying to reduce emissions from deforestation through payments for performance in emission reduction. And there were things there that I really wanted to explore further as well. So I took the subjects at the Graduate Institute strategically so I could do research on the things I couldn't do during my internship. So a lot of the essays I wrote and eventually my master's thesis really build on that. So I guess and remember also you always acquire, I don't think any degree would really fully equip you for the kind of the different works that you'd encounter. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Abby.
Just if I may quickly add something to that question, like I think I have been a hiring manager looking at like entry-level positions. I'm never looking for someone that knows everything. I've never had that experience, and I never expect somebody that to know anything. What I expect is someone that is eager to learn and willing to do the work and kind of like proactive about the work and following up, and also somebody that is organized and kind of willing to kind of come at it with like a very can-do attitude. So I would really encourage all of you not to think that you have to come into your first job as experts, because nobody is an expert. The world is changing so fast that nobody's really an expert on any topic. So please stay. It's more like the humbleness that I would appreciate in a candidate than somebody that comes and tries to like kind of word drop everything they know to try to impress me. So yeah, I would kind of actually switch the question back to stay humble and come in as like, I'm willing to learn and I'm willing to do the work.
Thank you, Sophia. I'm going to ask two questions that were asked in the Q&A because they're actually a bit related. So Duanxia asked, how do you think the current trend of vegetarianism impacts the food and agriculture industry? And then Pierre asked, more specifically to Sophia, how connected or implicated is the meat industry with the global effort for fighting antimicrobial resistance? And where does FAIR fit into this? So first the vegetarianism part, maybe, and then the meat industry. So maybe Michael, you want to answer the first part?
Sure, thanks, Lucille, and thank you, Duanxia, for your question. Vegetarianism and veganism in the food and agriculture industry, it's a major trend, especially in the West. It's going to spread and carry on. Vegetarian alternatives to meat are, as you know, becoming more and more available and more I'm sorry if there's background noise, that's my dog, and more affordable as well. However, we mustn't forget that meat consumption is also an aspiration for numerous people around the world, and that having the financial means and the possibility to consume meat regularly on a daily basis, basically like we're doing in Europe and North America, is seen as a real aspiration in numerous parts of the world, with much greater populations usually than the Western populations consuming vegetarian products. So that's where the environmental impact still is and will be, producing and basically destroying lands to produce food for animals that we consume for meat. But it's a rising trend, and I'm sure that whether you decide to work in the private sector or also in the public sector, vegetarianism is going to become an essential topic and should be very much encouraged, because we don't have the carrying capacity to consume meat, neither now or in the future when there will be 10 billion of us. Thanks, and sorry about the background noise.
I also have a question, if I may. So Sophia made a really interesting argument, also to look for the private sector, and saying that in a lot of like big international organizations, like the mentorship and the guidance you have during that period is not that much. And also looking from a recruitment perspective that you already have, I was already interested if you actually see there's a difference between people that did, for example, both public and private experience versus merely having international organization experience applying for jobs.
Hi, thank you, Tim. I don't know, is that a question specifically for me or kind of or open to the panel?
More also general to the panel because I know Seda told that she also selected a lot of consultants, so it'd be interesting to see like what kind of like background is like interesting and also functional versus just having this idea of having a public interest. So it's also wider to the other panels.
Okay, so I can give a quick response because I have to leave, but then I'll open to the rest of the panel. So yeah, I mean, I think again, as I mentioned, like the sales and like the commercial angle, I think that if I'm looking for that in a candidate, I will definitely look at someone that has had experience in the private sector. From my experience, that is immensely helpful in terms of like, and especially if it's like kind of a client-facing role or like outward-facing role. Then I think for thematic experience, sometimes, I mean, I wouldn't want to compare. I think there's like amazing expertise in different organizations or academia or etc. So I wouldn't necessarily only look for the private sector. So I really think it depends on the kind of role that you're applying for and what the job description is. And then I think then you would distinguish if you need somebody that has a specific private sector expertise or not.
Thank you very much, Sophia. And I know you have to go and we're a bit over time, actually. So I think we're going to have to end here, but just if you have more questions that haven't been answered, you can send them to the alumni email address and I'll pass them on to the panelists and I'm sure they'll be happy to answer them. Yes, so thank you very much for all of you for joining us. And I'm sorry the Q&A session had to be so short. I knew you had like more questions, but now you've been introduced to those 4 great people, so I'm sure you can ask more
Thanks
questions.
for organizing and inviting us.
Yes, thank you for being here and thank you for such wonderful insights. It's very motivating. Yeah, and thank you, Aline, for moderating.
Thank you, Aline. Thank you, Lucille, and thanks to all who participated. Good luck.
Yes, thank you
so
to
much.
everybody and thank you for the questions. Good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.